Hello, everybody. Welcome to this guest episode. I'm here with Thom Wright, and Tom, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm Thom Wright with InventionArt, LLC, and we provide early development product services, prototyping, design. We help people get started with manufacturing, and we also do quite a bit in the patent sector, patent drawings, and everything kind of feeds off each other from there.
And this is a hyper crucial point, in my opinion, because if you don't have a good product and you proceed with Amazon or any other sort of e-commerce, it's not so good. Everything just sort of falls apart. I mean, this is the single
Yeah.
determining factor. But it's also when generally sellers have the least amount of experience and expertise. So putting a heavy emphasis on this and doing it right initially, I think is important. Um,
Yeah, and really what's important is the coordination of all of that, because let's say you have your product and your patent and your design. Let's take those as three separate things.
okay.
If you have a product idea and you go straight to making it, you'll probably end up with a product that's almost great. And if you just skip the whole development phase, really prototyping, testing, and all that, and then also if you take your idea and go straight to patenting without doing any development on it, you'll end up with a patent, but often you'll want to change that patent after you've done the design process, because you'll have found better solutions to things through that development process. And so really you have to think of development and prototyping as being a pretty big step sort of after the idea phase, but before the patent phase or the production phase. Because if you go straight to a manufacturer, obviously if you go straight to a manufacturer with just sort of a concept, they're not going to know what to do with that. But if you go to them with something that you don't have the clearest ideas of, you're just gonna end up with something that, like, well, this would have been great if the latch worked properly, or if it folded the way I wanted it to. And so I feel like that phase, the early stuff, where you're not treating your idea as a finished, like an idea doesn't have an end to it. It has a beginning, which is the spark, but it sort of trails off to the practical matters of manufacturing and things like that, being kind of iterated the whole time. If you get really stuck on the original, here's what I'm going to say. Nobody's original idea is quite as good as that idea, then iterated, developed, hashed out a little further, made better in some way, or made more manufacturable, or cheaper to make, or something like that. And a lot of people will add and subtract features. A really common thing is that people want to do stuff that's app connected, and then they kind of later realize that the app connectivity isn't really a main feature, but it triples their development costs because now they have to hire a developer and get approved on the Apple App Store and that kind of stuff. And so you have to kind of take each feature and say, how important is this? And really not how important is it, is how much more likely does this feature going to produce a buy click on Amazon or whatever platform you might be using.
Right. And yeah, right. Speaking of Amazon, I guess just to put this in context for people, this is not the model where you're buying direct from manufacturer a completed product. What Tom and I are going to talk about today is if you have an idea for a product and to your knowledge it is entirely new, it's novel, it's never been done before, at least in the way that you're thinking about it. So we're going to go through.
Or it's an improvement on something.
Right. Well, yeah. So maybe if you could add some color to that, like how much of an improvement constitutes a new build like this?
Well, when you're talking about mold making and anything, any changes you make require a brand new build. But when you're talking about, let's use fabric goods. Fabric goods are a great example because there's no, fabric goods are one of those things that, like, if you need 10 t-shirts made, you need 10 people to make a t-shirt, or one person to make 10 t-shirts, or it's not, it's a one-to-one, somebody has to make it, unless there's an automated machine. But for most fabric goods, it's just literally a room full of people running sewing machines, and each one is put out by a person. If you're going to make a change to a product like that, it's really just a matter of communicating that to the manufacturer. If you're doing something that's plastic injection molded, though, any change in the features requires a new mold, unless it's very small and they can cut it into the existing mold or something like that. And so you end up in a situation where if you want to be sort of change proof when you get to the point where you're going to end up with a sea container or something,
right?
But for as far as improvements go, really, almost every idea somebody has is an improvement on somebody else's ideas. That's just sort of the nature of societies and the evolution of ideas, is that most people don't have something, like there's no category on Amazon for it. You know what I mean? Like something completely out, that is just new and nobody has never seen anything like it. But mostly what happens is people see something that exists and they think of an improvement and they want to implement that improvement. And so you then limit your development to that improvement, essentially, and kind of tack it on to the existing body of products.
Okay. And so what then? So you have an idea for an improvement on a product category. How do you go from concept phase to, and I guess you mentioned earlier perhaps that you'd want to think this through pretty carefully, because once it's cast in the mold, you're done. Once it's shipped, you're done. So you would have wanted to top load the work intellectually in this first part.
Yeah. You want to, if you're going to take so a lot of times if you're going to take something and do an improvement, one of the first steps is to get several examples of the things that already exist in that category and sort of compare them and figure out what features of that you like best, and and then take your improvement and sort of put it on that object in whichever way it wants.
Okay, just tacking something on,
scraping
things off.
It's a new buckle. It's a new, it's something new, or a lot of times an improvement that people make is to add some electronics to something that makes it Internet of Things, or somehow Bluetooth enabled, or there's a lot of products out there that people will take like a very regular product. I mean, at this point, even when you buy like a washer and dryer, there's some app connectivity that you can opt for. But also, people are smart. I mean, a lot of times especially in things like exercise equipment, people will just think of a better, there are certain fields that are not, I guess what I would say, that they don't feel fully developed to me. There's room somewhere for improvements, and people make those improvements, and a lot of times I feel like that really does make the difference, especially when you're talking about a global marketplace that the market has access to everything kind of made. You need to have some hook, essentially, to differentiate your product from the others.
Okay. What kind of, you mentioned there are some fields that are riper for this than others, or what sort of fields would you be looking at for that?
Like specific sports or specific kind of, you know what I'm saying? Like not general. There's not a lot of room for, I don't know, towels and washcloths. Right. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of room in bicycle wheels, maybe, or there's not a lot of but there is a lot of room in camera mounts, or as I said, like app connectivity things. Exercise equipment, there seems to be always a lot of innovation in. I'm trying to think of good examples, but there are just some fields that are like that feel just very packed, packed from a point of view. And then the other thing is that there are fields that appeal more to much larger entities. And so I always feel like the trick with Amazon is to find a niche that you sort of begin to understand better than your competitors, or you have an innovation that they haven't quite thought of. There's accessories for iPhones is one of those, like open, like iPhone cases, closed. Other accessories, lots of room for development, right? Because if you set out to do an iPhone case right now, there's gonna be 50,000 other products like it that you're gonna compete with. But a great example is those suction cup things where you hold the phone kind of on the back. Yeah. I think I did 3 patents in a year on devices like that, and so it shows that there's an openness to it. And that's the other thing about ideas is that frequently, from my experience, I do the patent drawings for probably 150, 200 patents a year. Patents come in packs. Like the society is somehow now ripe for a certain kind of idea, and 10 or 15 people have that idea at that time. There was one year where attorney Rich Goldstein, who you spoke to in another video, and I think we did 4 patents for ways to put lotion on your back when you're in the shower. It was like,
I knew it.
Just for some reason it was an empty field.
It's ready.
Then people all thought of the same ideas at the same time.
What do you think causes those sort of societal light bulbs to go off?
I just think it's like things become available to people. At some point, having a screen on your device was prohibitively expensive for development. You really needed to be thinking of selling units in the millions in order to make it worthwhile. And now, if you want like a little touch screen on your device, it's not really any big deal. You have tons to choose from. They're not very expensive. It's easy to integrate that into a device that you might have. So the technology catches up. People are more exposed to certain kinds of objects, and so those improvements sort of make themselves available to people all at once.
Right. Yeah, manufacturers have economies of scale. I've heard it to illustrate this point that it was actually harder to source a microwave without a clock than one with a clock in it, just because the parts came configured that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, maybe a confluence of consumer demand, but more probable the technology catches up and it's just it's the right time.
And also though, the Amazon is a perfect example of like an emerging a business where you could compete against much larger entities than yourself on a sort of level playing field. And so there are a lot more people doing that now because it's possible. It used to be the case that you sort of had to go and make your own platform and start your own store and do all the web development and all of the things and then all the marketing and advertising over that. And so because things are available to people, they take advantage of them. And then through taking advantage of them, they have a shared experience. And through a shared experience, they start to have some similar ideas, I think is kind of what happens.
Right. Okay, makes sense. So we have this idea. We order a prototype. We sort of Frankenstein it together. We're hacking it a little bit, and we have this prototype, which is part your innovation and part the product that you ordered, competitor, industry standard, whatever. Is that enough to prove that you have something workable here?
Depends on what the object is. Very often. So I think that the prototype that you're thinking about is the one that somebody makes at their kitchen table while they're kind of hashing out the idea, which is slightly different than the sort of product level prototypes that I produce. Yeah. And some things need a proof of concept so that you know whether it's usable or desirable or works at all. And some things don't. Some things are really obviously, can exist and do exist. If you think of a new idea for a wedding band, for example, ring, you know that it exists. People use them. now what your challenge is thinking of a design differentiation. It doesn't need features. It doesn't need a prototype except for you to have it in your hand to look at to make sure that the proportions are right and that kind of thing. Then if you're talking about like a piece of electronics, you need to make a crude version, and then you need to make kind of a semi-crude version, and then you need to make a product level version, and then probably you'll do a couple of those before you really arrive at the exact like the sweet spot in terms of cost of manufacturing and how easy it is to manufacture. And some of the challenges are that with some things you can go straight to like a short run and just test your market and see if things starts to sell, then you should make more. Some things you need to make in the tens of thousands in order to get the machine started, in order to make something that won't cost you more than you can sell it for.
And that would be stuff like molds, and we're talking plastics, metals, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
If you think of an improvement on a drywall screw, you better be planning to make millions of them before you're even going to know if your market will support it.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're going to make knitted sweaters, you just make them one at a time, and when you run out, then you need to make more.
Well, it's a way easier to iterate, and I'm just thinking, soft goods, really anything that doesn't need. I'm just trying to think of the fabric was a good example that you brought up before. Any other product categories fall into that class of sort of rapid prototyping, and you can get to market pretty quickly? I'm just thinking.
Think about single part items. A great example is, how about the Apple AirPods. Frequently people will buy some single part silicone accessory to make it fit in their ear better. And so those are the kinds of things that you can develop and you can get to mold and that without it being prohibitively, well, I don't know if it's prohibitively, but without it being very expensive. I always think that one of the tricks is to try to find products that have a high material to cost ratio. And a great example of that is like if you take 10 or so garbage bags and melt them down, what would those cost you? 10 cents? You could melt them down into a surfing fin, which is $22. It's the same material. It's of the same volume. It's just that its particular shape makes it more valuable. And so to me, I think that that's a great way to start with things, is just try to find a single part item, something that's made out of one thing or one thing and nuts and bolts kind of existing hardware. Is those kinds of things are not too difficult to short run. Okay. Whereas you can't really short run certain other things. And as I said, those are the kinds of things that are either very inexpensive on their own, like nuts and screws and that kind of hardware, or something like that. And then there are other things on the way other end, like you can't who cares if you have an idea for a new cell phone?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like unless you're going in with $1 billion, then it doesn't really matter that you have the idea.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because when people come with patents for the auto industry, for example, to me, I'm like, yeah, but the cost of entry to that category is high. Plus, you're dealing with, if you were going to try to OEM something, you're dealing with companies that already have their own engineering department. So you'd have to push through please sign this non-disclosure agreement so that I can tell you an idea that your engineers are going to tell you is crap. You know what I mean? It's kind of what you end up with. And so it's good to find those sort of the in between stuff that's and I feel like the places that those exist the most are in really specific fields. If you love surfing, or you love tennis, or you love golf, or something like that, those are the kinds of things that people who love those things spend money on them, because that's their kind of hobby and it becomes kind of part of their identity. And so they're willing to pay kind of a premium for them because they are specialized.
Right. Garbage bags, commodity, surfing fin, attachments, same materials, but better ratio, better cost. Yeah, the material to cost ratio there is a brilliant observation. Um, okay, so what's like, obviously specific examples aside, but if someone's going to invention art and you're like, what sort of stuff do you like to see? How developed does the prototype need to be? And if someone sends something to you and you're like, yes, we can definitely make this work and it's market viable. Could you maybe describe that in like, vague terms, not to disclose anything, but just like a general profile?
So the information that I get from a potential client really varies between like a napkin sketch and some conversations and full-on engineered CAD models. And so to me, it doesn't really matter. Like either way, it's like if you know what I mean? Like if they have, what's that?
Like we'll take a shot at it, right?
Yeah, no, it's not even a shot. You develop a sense of what people are after,
Right.
and then also people who have things less developed usually are more interested in being coached a little bit.
Okay.
And so they give you a napkin sketch, you do a design, they make some comments, you iterate the design, comments, keep going. The way that I work anyway is that I just work on the design until the client's happy with it. And so I'm willing to take sort of however many comments, and it's never like 50 rounds of stuff. It's 10 rounds or something like that, because I try to listen to the information they're giving me and come up with solutions that they're going to like. And then I'm not super surprised when somebody's like, yeah, that's what I was talking about. It's just a matter of developing a feel for that. And so people it varies how ready they are. And it also, what I try to do to kind of weed that out is that when I first talk to somebody, I try to talk to them about their goals before I talk to them about their product. That some people want to get something patented because they think there's some licensability to their patent. Some people are already a company that manufactures things and they just want to get a quick patent so that they have some protection. Some people want a product that they're gonna make and start a new business. Some people, it really varies. And so to me, what I think is most important is finding out what their goals are and then trying to help them get to that through. So for example, sometimes somebody will come to me for a prototype and then I talk to them and they say, yeah, I've got this investor meeting and I'm going to go and talk to these other people. And then I have these other people overseas and so I'm like, why don't we put together some photorealistic renderings that'll cost you, a tenth as much, because your idea doesn't necessarily need a physical prototype. Mm-hmm. It needs, if you're at the point where you're like, well, I have an idea and I'm trying to attract investors, I don't know how much money you want to spend on a prototype, because a prototype will become obsolete the first time somebody makes a comment about it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You're like, oh yeah, that would have been a little better. Maybe I should go back and make another prototype. And then other things, if you didn't make a prototype, you'd be crazy, because you just have to, in order to be able to make the kinds of choices you're going to need to make to get to that final product.
Is that because it's less design and more function? Like,
yeah, or it's a lot of, so a frequent thing that people do when they have an idea about something, and we're talking about straight ideas, I'm not talking about like a specific product, is that they kind of leave off for the future the part that they don't understand. And so you end up in this, you know what I mean? Like, well, I don't know, I'll get an engineer to figure that out after the fact. And what ends up happening is you say, well, this part can't be infinitely slippery at some point and also infinitely holds at other points. You just like, there's no material that works that way, or there's no, there isn't a solution for exactly that, but we can find a solution. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, and so people will leave that off a lot. They'll say like, oh, I'll just have somebody figure that out for me later, that part of the invention. And that's like, I guess that's how you get perpetual motion machines, and you know what I mean. You get like stuff that the core of the innovation hasn't been dealt with in any serious manner, and so that's a great reason to do a prototype, is because you have some detail that needs to be worked on. It needs to be kind of stroked a little bit, or you're not going to arrive at something that is certainly not a product. You know what I mean?
It'll be something. It will not be a product, but it'll be something. A modern art, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Because at a certain point, yeah, gravity, for friction, just
that's
performance, rubber hits the road, and you have to see if it works or not. Yeah.
Well, and also another really common sort of parallel thing to that is people come up with an innovation, but there's no way cost-wise that innovation could be included and have the product compete in its market.
Good point.
That happens a lot. You end up with, all kinds of, I don't know, just the add-on stuff that isn't maybe at the core of the thing, and then nobody's going to pay twice as much for something because it has a feature that they, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
People typically will cost shop, I guess.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that when you develop something that you can manufacture and sell it for something that is in the range of the things that already exist, if things exist in that market.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And adding on to that, have you seen people design products with different platforms, distribution platforms in mind? Because, for example, the product you're talking about, where it needs to be price competitive, practical considerations, physical form factor needs to be up to par. Like that's like a Walmart product. It's good value, and there's also maybe debatably a Kickstarter product, which is hinges on an innovation of some sort and a visual differentiator, very clickable, and maybe Amazon something in between. I'm not quite sure. But have you noticed people starting with channels in mind, or are they just more just like it's like I have this idea and whatever happens distribution wise later happens?
I would say in my experience, everybody has a channel and they have like a vision of what they're going to do. A lot of people have a vision of, I'm going to patent this idea, and then my patent has a certain value to it that I could use for licensing. And I guess I'm going to say as a tip that you can start a band in your garage that has a platinum record, and totally possible, does happen. The idea that you would have a totally undeveloped idea that you patented and then somebody would license that patent from you, I've yet to see it.
Okay.
And that's different. And that's different than a developed idea that also has a patent. Those kinds of things you can license. But just to be like, well, I got the patent, so I'm going to be rich. It doesn't work that way. As I said, I haven't seen it. I know that people maintain patent portfolios and license things out and all that. But when I'm talking about like new inventors, frequently that's their model. Well, it's just the idea. I'm just going to have somebody else do the stuff. And it's in fact the doing the stuff, like knowing what platform you're getting ready for, or that really ends up kind of mattering. And so I do see people who are, they're talking about Kickstarter, and they're like, okay, I'm going to do a Kickstarter campaign. Can you help me come up with some assets for my Kickstarter campaign? And then other people really are like, well, I have an Amazon seller account that I'm getting started, and I just want to manufacture this idea. And then some people are thinking they're going to visit their local drugstore and see if or like get the attention of a buyer at a trade show, or which I think is to me, there are certain markets where that's what you do. You make like Toy Fair. You go to Toy Fair with your toy. You have, you have 10 examples that are really nice prototypes, and then you try to attract orders. And so, I think the platform makes a huge difference as to where you might start, kind of not exactly at the original idea, but I guess that's not even true. If you're going to sell something, if you're going to develop something for Amazon, you should develop something that sells on it, that that is the kinds of things they sell on Amazon.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like if you're going to do a Kickstarter campaign, you want to do something like you want to think about who uses Kickstarter. You know, who uses Kickstarter? It's people that know how to use their computer. You know what I mean? It's people who are willing to put up a little bit of money because something's got like a cool factor to it that they're not going to get the product right away. That's not the same as like somebody putting an add-on item of shampoo in their Amazon cart. It is a different market.
Yeah.
And I think you really should design your concepts to match who you're selling to.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, if you're listening to this right now and we are bringing up these points, it's an interesting thing to think about, at least, right? Because the idea is one thing, but execution on the idea and a working prototype is another thing. You could start with cost, as Tom's mentioned, so cost, the ratio of the value of the raw materials to the perceived value on the part of the consumer, very important, and starting with channels in mind as well. Like, I mean, yeah, Amazon is definitely different than Kickstarter. Like I've done both, so I've seen it, but it's like, Amazon's probably a middle spectrum between a Walmart purchase and a Kickstarter purchase.
That's right.
Yeah, something
That's
like
right.
More day-to-day practical though, for the most part.
Yeah. I mean, for Kickstarter is a pretty specific thing. I think you have to have some a certain kind of attractiveness to make people want to fund something that you're still working on.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. That's decent enough summary. So, and I guess anything that are the things that you see inventors or product people getting wrong all the time, common mistakes, and they come to you and you're just like, I really wish you hadn't done that, or that wasn't so good.
Most of the time I'm with people soon enough in the process.
Nice.
I try to be very honest with people. I'm not right all the time, but I feel like I do when I see a red flag, I point it out. Sometimes that hurts my business a little bit, but my firm is not. We're not trying to catch everybody. We're trying to get some good clients and help them out. And so it's not the thing that I just told you about starting a rock band and getting a platinum album. I think I've said on the phone 3 or 4 times this week. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, this
people,
week. Okay.
yeah, people like especially when it comes to intellectual property stuff, patents, trademarks, copyright. People have there's sort of some sort of like societally wide misconceptions of some things you can do with that. I guess people, for example, a really common one is people think that because you have a patent that gives you the right to manufacture something. You don't actually need anybody's permission to manufacture something. You don't need any kind of, I don't know, any check from the government or anything like that. And also the concept that a patent prevents other people from making your idea. That's only true if you litigate against them. But the core of why you get a patent is because you'd like to be able to like make something without somebody else copying you. And I think that's totally valid and works very well. But it can't be your only thing. You know what I mean? It really need to be doing parallel or concurrent processes if you really do want to come out with something that has to do with design development, testing, the patent. One really good side tip, by the way, is that for Amazon people, a design patent does a great job. So I don't know, do you know the difference between a utility patent and a design patent?
Rich and I were talking about that a little bit the other day, but I'd be curious to hear your take.
Yeah, so a utility patent is just about a specific innovation, functionality, something like that. Design patent is literally like top, bottom, side views of a thing. You could design patent a Velvet Elvis lamp if you wanted to, as long as you would come up with an original design. And so a design patent it's not examined by the patent office. So, and it's probably like, I don't know, a third of the price of a utility patent. But for some reason, I've heard this from a couple of different attorneys, Amazon will look at a design patent, and because a design patent is literally just views of the product, meaning it's not like a view of the hand that shows a dotted line to the thing that's moving. It's just literally like, views from a box. It means you don't have to be an expert to examine it. And so I've heard of people having good luck with design patents where they produce something, somebody else produces that thing, they put it on Amazon, and Amazon kicks them off because you show them your design patent. So I feel like, and because if you have a design patent, you can say patent pending while you're doing up the application, and it kind of carries a lot of the same weights as a utility patent, but it's sort of like, I don't know, a quarter of the paperwork. And a lot of people have been saying it's actually more effective at doing the thing you're trying to do, which is prevent somebody else from taking your idea and making money off of it.
Right. Yeah. That pretty much corroborates what Rich was saying the other day.
Yeah.
Counterintuitive a little bit, maybe, given other business practices, but Amazon, that seems to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Tom. That was like a whirlwind tour of pretty much what you need. Super smart, super knowledgeable. If you want to let people know where and when they can get a hold of you, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's great. If anybody wants to go to InventionArt.net is my website, and you go to the for consumers page, and either call me or leave something on the form, and I'll respond to it usually that day. Yeah, I'd love to speak to anybody.
All right, cool. Thom Wright, InventionArt LLC. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
Yeah.